Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in San Francisco. There's uncertainty over whether the U.S. and Iran will hold another round of talks in Pakistan after the White House said Vice President J.D. Vance is preparing to depart for Islamabad today, even as Iran refused to confirm it'll participate. A spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry accused the U.S. of violating the 10-day ceasefire. He cited the U.S. Navy's seizure of an Iranian cargo ship Sunday while calling for the release of its sailors and vowing to retaliate. Meanwhile, President Trump's warned he's highly unlikely to extend the 10-day ceasefire with Iran beyond its expiration on Wednesday evening, and said the U.S. will likely resume bombing immediately if Iran refuses a deal. On Capitol Hill, dozens of military veterans and their family members were arrested Monday as they nonviolently occupied the Cannon House office building to protest the U.S. and Israeli war on Iran while demanding a meeting with House Speaker Mike Johnson. At least 62 people were arrested, including elderly and disabled activists. Those protests continued. The protests were organized by a coalition that included About Face, Veterans for Peace, Common Defense, and military families speak out. This is Christina Sarson, a U.S. Army veteran from Pennsylvania.
I personally am here for my sons. As a veteran, I know the harm that wars do to civilian populations, but also to our soldiers. I'm talking about the loss of life. I'm talking about injuries and lives changed forever. I'm talking about PTSD and moral injury, and that's why I'm here today.
The State Department says it'll host a second round of talks between Lebanon and Israel in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, the first negotiation since a tenuous ceasefire went into effect last week. The announcement came as people across Lebanon held funerals Monday for loved ones whose bodies were retrieved from the rubble of buildings left flattened by Israeli strikes. Entire relatives prayed by the temporary graves of 80-year-old Hussein Dabouk and his 32-year-old son, Rabi, who were killed in the hours before the ceasefire took effect last Friday morning.
This family, why is it their fault? Is it because they didn't leave Tyre? Is this our fault that we stayed? We don't want to leave our land. Our land is our honor and our dignity. What did these people do wrong for Israel to come and bomb them? You, Israel, who were supposed to do a ceasefire, committed a crime before it could take effect.
Lebanon's health ministry says Israeli attacks in March and April killed over 2,300 people, leaving over 6,700 injured and 1.2 million people displaced from their homes. Lebanon's in Gaza, Israeli strikes have killed at least 5 Palestinians in separate incidents. An Israeli airstrike killed at least 3 people in western Khan Yunis, according to health officials at Nasser Hospital. Israeli attacks have killed more than 750 Palestinians since last year's so-called ceasefire deal took effect. It comes as Israel's officially reestablished the Sinur settlement in the occupied West Bank, more than 20 years after it was dismantled. Elsewhere, a Palestinian boy was killed earlier today after being struck by a vehicle in the security convoy of an Israeli minister in the occupied West Bank. 16-year-old Mohammed Majdi al-Jabir was riding his bicycle to school when he was run over. Haaretz reports the convoy was en route to secure Israeli settlement minister Orit Strok, who lives in an illegal Israeli settlement in Hebron. Meanwhile, a joint report by the EU, UN, and the World Bank reveals $71.4 billion will be needed over the next decade for Gaza's recovery and reconstruction. The report also warns human development across the Gaza Strip has been set back by 77 years. Amnesty International has released its annual global human rights report describing the leaders of Israel, Russia, and the United States as, quote, voracious predators, unquote, intent on economic and political domination. The report documents the U.S.-Israeli war in Iran, which has killed more than 3,000 people, Israeli attacks in Lebanon, which have killed nearly 2,400, and the death toll in Gaza, which has surpassed 72,500 since October 2023. The report also points to signs of resistance, including the growing number of states joining South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. This is Amnesty Secretary General Agnès Callamard.
It started with unlawful U.S. and Israeli attack in violation of the UN Charter. No self-defense can be invoked here. It morphed into open warfare against civilians, Iran launching indiscriminate, disproportionate retaliatory strikes, Israel escalating its attacks on Lebanon. The conflict is endangering the lives and health of millions of people across the region.
The report comes as Hungary's newly elected Prime Minister, Péter Magyar, declared his government would be legally obligated to detain Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu if he enters Hungarian territory while still subject to an International Criminal Court arrest warrant. Speaking to reporters, Magyar said, quote, if a country is a member of the ICC and a person who's wanted by the ICC enters our territory, then that person must be taken into custody, unquote. Japan's relaxed decades of restrictions on the sale of weapons and ammunition, clearing the way for arms exports to more than a dozen countries. Today's announcement by the Japanese Prime Minister is a further shift away from Japan's pacifist post-war constitution, created by the U.S. as it occupied Japan 8 decades ago. China said in response it's seriously concerned about Japan's, quote, reckless militarization. Cuba's government's confirmed it recently hosted U.S. officials on the island, marking the first time senior American diplomats have visited the island nation since 2016. Cuban Deputy Foreign Minister Alejandro Garcia del Toro said lifting the U.S. oil blockade is a top priority, calling it, quote, an unjustified punishment of the entire Cuban population. The talks come as President Trump's repeatedly floated the use of military force against Cuba, saying his attention could turn to the island after the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran. Last week, Trump said, quote, we may stop by Cuba after we finish with this, quote. Meanwhile, the leaders of Mexico, Brazil, and Spain, meeting in Barcelona as part of a gathering of progressive heads of state, issued a joint statement pledging increased humanitarian aid to Cuba and calling for its sovereignty to be respected. Deaths in ICE custody have reached a record high this fiscal year, with at least 17 immigrants reported dead since January. The most recent case is of 27-year-old Ale Damien Carbonell Betancourt, an immigrant from Cuba, found unresponsive last week while jailed in Miami. He reportedly died of a presumed suicide, but the cause is still under investigation. We'll have more on this story after headlines. The Justice Department's demanded officials in Wayne County, Michigan, turn over more than 860,000 ballots, along with envelopes and receipts from the 2024 general election. Trump defeated Kamala Harris to win Michigan's 15 electoral votes, but he lost in Wayne County, which is home to Detroit, by nearly 250,000 votes. The DOJ's threats come weeks after the FBI subpoenaed election records in Arizona's Maricopa County and raided an elections hub in Fulton County, Georgia, seizing thousands of ballots. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel called the request absurd and baseless. She wrote, quote, once again, President Trump's weaponizing the Justice Department in an attempt to sabotage our democratic process and turn it into his own personal agency to interfere in state elections. Meanwhile, FBI Director Kash Patel told Fox News arrests over the 2020 election are coming as soon as this week. In related news, Kash Patel has filed a $250 million defamation lawsuit against The Atlantic magazine and journalist Sarah Fitzpatrick after she reported Patel has alarmed FBI colleagues with episodes of excessive drinking, erratic behavior, and unexplained absences. The report cited more than 24 people, including current and former FBI officials, members of Congress, lobbyists, former advisors, and others. Several officials said morning meetings at the FBI were rescheduled until the afternoon because Patel was incapacitated following nights of heavy drinking. Kash Patel's security detail reportedly struggled to wake him on multiple occasions last year, and in at least one instance requested breaching equipment normally used by SWAT teams to enter buildings. Meanwhile, U.S. Labor Secretary Lori Chavez de Remer resigned on Monday amidst a series of reports that she abused her position. She's accused of using public funds for personal travel, bringing subordinates to a strip club, drinking on the job in government offices, and having a romantic affair with her bodyguard. This comes after Chavez de Remer's husband, Sean de Remer, was barred from the Labor Department's headquarters after at least 2 female staff members reported he sexually assaulted them. Lori Chavez de Remer is the 3rd member of Trump's cabinet to be forced out in the last 7 weeks, all of them women, following the departure of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem and Attorney General Pam Bondi. Wired magazines revealed new details about how facial recognition technology has been used to closely monitor sports fans at the iconic Madison Square Garden in New York. Over a 2-year period, security staff for New York Knicks owner James Dolan used the surveillance system to track the movements of a trans woman, in part to prevent her image from being seen on TV. An 18-page dossier obtained by Wired shows the system tracked all of her movements, including when she entered and exited the bathroom. Dolan also used the facial recognition system to ban hundreds of people from the venue, including a group of lawyers involved in disputes with him. Photos of the lawyers were fed into the facial recognition software to prevent them from entering Madison Square Garden. Hundreds of delegates are arriving at the United Nations this week for the world's largest gathering of indigenous peoples, the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. This year's forum centers on the survival of indigenous peoples in the context of armed conflict. Advocates also warn that the artificial intelligence boom is driving a new era of digital extractivism, with tech companies scraping indigenous medicinal knowledge, traditional stories, and genetic data without consent, while massive data centers threaten tribal lands and water resources. The Trump administration's also made it increasingly difficult for delegates from the Global South to obtain U.S. visas to attend the UN forum. And the Goldman Environmental Prize, widely known as the Green Nobel, has announced its 2026 recipients. For the first time since the prize was established in 1989, all 6 winners were women. They are Iroro Tanchi of Nigeria, Borin Kim of South Korea, Sarah Finch of the United Kingdom, Theonila Roca Matbob of Papua New Guinea, and Yuvelis Morales Blanco of Colombia, and Alana Akak Hurley of the United States. Hurley is the executive director for the United Tribes of Bristol Bay. She led a successful campaign against the Pebble Mine, a proposed gold and copper mine that would have required construction of a massive power plant, natural gas pipeline, and huge toxic tailing ponds.
This award honors all of us, those who stood against all odds, those who never wavered in speaking up against greed and destruction. It honors those who have shown up year after year, writing letters, testifying at hearings, protesting, and raising their kids to value people over profit.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in San Francisco with Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video. And for more of our audience-supported journalism, go to democracynow.org, where you can download our news app, sign up for our newsletter, subscribe to the daily podcast, and so much more.